Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and I'm the founder and CEO of IgnitedThinkers. And today I'm very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Mr. Sylvain Laporte. Mr. Laporte is a Canadian Armed Forces veteran who served as the 11th president of the Canadian Space Agency from 2015 to 2020. Mr. Laporte is committed to advancing Canada's presence in space through satellites, exploration, and astronaut missions in the service of science and innovation. From 2011 to 2015, Mr. Laporte was CEO of the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. Prior to this, he held the position of Executive Director, Industrial Technologies Office at Industry Canada, where he was responsible for managing financial contribution programs in research and development for the aerospace, defense, security, and space industries. Mr. Laporte earned a bachelor's degree in computer science and a master's degree in computer engineering from the Royal Military College of Canada. He served with the Canadian Armed Forces for over 20 years, gaining experience as an aerospace engineer in diverse areas, from engineering and maintenance to human resource management. Mr. Laporte is passionate about leveraging space to inspire Canadian youth to pursue careers in STEM. I met Mr. Laporte at Stardust Festival, which took place in Canada, and I was incredibly inspired with all that he had to say about getting students into the space community. I'm incredibly excited to speak with him today and share his journey of how he navigated his path into the aerospace sector. So welcome, Mr. Laporte. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Well, thank you, Chiquita. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And you mentioned that you were inspired. Excuse me, a little bit of a cold. You mentioned that you were inspired when you met me in August. The reverse is also true. I was totally amazed and taken aback by your talent, your potential, and in particular, your passion for space. So clearly that's something that we both share, and I hope that'll make this interview that much more interesting for our auditors.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm so excited to hear about how you navigated this journey. But to kind of kick off our conversation, I wanted to start off with, although you have retired, you are constantly looking ways to inspire youth and young professionals in the aerospace sector. And, I was curious from your perspective, what are some ways that Canadian students can explore and learn more about the space industry?
Okay, well, to make sure people understand, I'm retired from a full-time job in the public service, but that doesn't mean that I'm retired and all I'm doing is playing cards all day. So that's not the case. So I do spend a considerable amount of time enjoying retirement and living a good life, but I also dedicate a lot of time to giving back, particularly to the space community and to STEM initiatives as well, which is what took me to that symposium, the Stardust Symposium that you and I both shared in early August. So that had a big STEM component to it. So I still keep quite active in terms of working and helping either young professionals or new startup companies in the space sector. So to answer your question, there's so many things that can be done if you're interested in space. And firstly, we need to realize that you don't need to be in a technical or STEM field. So I know your question focused a lot on STEM, but I think it's quite important to specify that there's a lot of opportunities for people in arts, people in literature, for people in communications. This forum here in this interview is part of your social media initiative, and there are a number of them that exist. And you don't have to be technically literate or in a STEM field to do something in space. And I think that's important for our readers to understand because there's a lot of space activities out there, and there's a lot of initiatives by different people that will bring a much larger, more multi-dimensional community to the space field. But let's talk about STEM. right? And focus on that for a second. So, there's all sorts of initiatives of various intensity with respect to how a young person could participate in a space activity of whatever type. So there's something to satisfy the needs and the likes of most of your auditors out there. And I think I like to name a few because I think that they're really important. So up there on the spectrum of high intensity involvement, Canada is well known in rocketry competition. We've participated in our Canadian universities have participated in a number of international competitions. And for the first time in August, in parallel to the Stardust symposium that we were at, we held the first Canadian rocketry competition. And you and I witnessed some of the universities launch their rockets in space. And that is the culmination of a lot of hard work by these teams, bringing together folks from the scientific field, the engineering fields, communication fields, and whatnot. They had to raise funds to be able to pay for a lot of that. So it brought different skills onto the teams. But to have witnessed the very first launch of these Canadian competitions in Canada, it was something to behold. I mean, yes, I did look. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so it was something to behold in terms of seeing the eyes of these folks, these young people, as they saw their rocket go up in the air. And yes, I did look at the rocket. It was quite impressive. But what took me, what got my attention was looking at their eyes, right? Seeing the accomplishment, teary-eyed and all. It was just fabulous to see how, everything that they worked so hard to do came together and they were able to launch, and it was a success. I think we have developed through this rocketry competition a number of disciples across Canada in these universities, and I think these folks are going to be examples for even younger people to follow. Right, so that's on some of the extremes. The Canadian Space Industry, the Canadian Space Agency has a nanosat program, a CubeSat program that we began a few years back when I was the president, and they've decided to launch, a successor to that. So they're now looking at, again, providing universities with the necessary funding to put, a small payload, a CubeSat into space, and providing good, opportunities for small scientific payloads to go out there. So it's about rockets. Now it's also about scientific payloads on nanosats and CubeSats. So if you're very much into that kind of high intensity activities, Canada has some opportunities for you, right? But there's also other types of activities that don't necessarily require months and years of involvement. We've got space hackathons across Canada. The Canadian Space Agency has led a few. There's been a few of them that were independent from the agencies. We've got student space associations at the high school level, at the college level, at the university level. So there's something there for everyone. And locally, I've witnessed a few, and there's one in my region. There's a few private citizens who got together with various backgrounds, and they're all passionate about space. So they meet regularly to talk about space. So long explanation, but what it does mean is that space is a lot more accessible than it was 20 years ago, and there's something for every one of your listeners out there.
Yeah, that was an amazing answer. I think you brought up a lot of really important points that I would like to continue just highlighting. I think first you mentioned that space is really for everyone, regardless of your interest or your skill set, whether it be STEM or, journalism, arts, policy, economics. There's a place for you in this industry, and it's a critical role in this industry. I love to think of space as its own little world. I said this before, but every career you're going to need in the you'll need just in the space industry. And I think that's what makes space and the industry itself so beautiful and such a family is because we need everyone, not just STEM backgrounds. And I think you really highlighted that. Additionally, you were mentioning how even for middle school, high school students, as well as university level, there's all sorts of programs. I know there's like SEDS Canada, there is like SGAC groups for Canadian students and a lot of other really cool programs that are in place already for young students and university students to kind of jumpstart their career in the aerospace sector. So, thank you for highlighting some of those. And I think it's really great for students to take advantage of these opportunities at a younger age so they can really see the part of the industry that they like best. Yeah, and also another thing, another question that I have for you is you've had an incredible honor of serving as the 11th president of the Canadian Space Agency, which has been involved in the space industry internationally in so many different ways. And I'm curious to learn more from your perspective. What were your goals during your term as president and kind of leaving the agency now? What are your future visions for where the Canadian Space Agency can go?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let me answer the second part of your question first. So, the vision of where the Canadian Space Agency goes belongs to the new president, right? It doesn't belong to me. So, during my term, we wrote a long-term strategy, but that strategy provides the flexibility in the specific direction that we should take in the future. So I will not, in all humbleness, I will not be putting words in the president's forum, and we'll leave it at that, right? But I think the future is very, very exciting. Now, with respect to my initial objectives, of course, that I can speak of. So when I took over the agency, I gave myself two very strategic goals to achieve in a 5-year period, right? So they're strategic, but they're also short-term in nature. One, quickly recognizing the important contribution space can make to Canadians. My first objective was to bring more space awareness to Canadians out there. So Canadians are generally proud of what we've done, right? But so they know about the Canadarm, they know about some of our astronauts and whatnot. But we needed to expand that conversation a bit more in terms of what we can do, in terms of climate change and what we can do with some of the scientific missions that we've put in space and whatnot. So raising awareness of Canadians on space subjects was one of my objectives. It's something that we've initiated in a very intense way. We achieved a lot of success, but it's something that you got to continue doing all the time. Marketing space, although as a government agency, it's still marketing. So it's something that you just can't leave alone, otherwise it'll disappear. So something I've initiated, something in which we gained some success, but it needs to continue. Right. So the other objective I had was to ensure that Canada could benefit from its current position on the international stage. So let's take our place, our rightful place that, a lot of people have worked very, very hard to build a strong Canadian space presence, but we needed to strengthen that. We needed our international partners who saw Canada as a good partner, a good ally, to realize that we were, in fact, a whole lot more than that. So a lot of conversations with my colleagues in the various space agencies, but in particular, a lot of conversations with CEOs of the large global leading space companies. And I think we did very well in having Canada called upon when there are new innovative international missions that are being designed, that are being brought forward, to a point where some of my colleagues were kind of jealously sharing with me that their own industry in their own country is often telling them that if Canada doesn't join, we can't do this mission. Right? So you achieve a higher level of notoriety, and that was part of the long-term objectives that I gave myself. So again, we've achieved success. That success is not mine. I built upon what a lot of people worked hard to develop in Canada. It needed a boost on the international side. So I was more of a spark to get those conversations going. So I take no merit in building Canada's reputation, not at all. If anything, I just made sure that people were aware of how strong we were. So that puts us in a very, very good position, because now a lot of Canadian industry are well thought of, or well perceived, and are considered as valued partners on the international scene. And I'm not talking about just some of our big companies. I'm talking about a lot of those medium and the small companies as well.
Incredible. And I think that your vision, especially with your first objective of communicating and reaching out to the larger public to explain and to inform and even inspire them to get involved with the aerospace industry and to convey that space is for humanity and space is for betterment of Canada and other places here on Earth for humanity, I think is an important message. And I'm really glad that you took that upon yourself and very seriously to spread that message and to get more community members who may directly be involved in defense, security, or aerospace, or even slightly tangent to that, to be involved in the aerospace sector and kind of bring that community together. So I think that's an important objective that I think I'm really glad that you and a lot of other space agencies are starting to take really seriously, because we are rapidly growing the space industry with commercialization, and as well as government involvement. Space is continuously expanding, and the ability for us to be able to inspire the next generation and more industries to kind of tie themselves in with aerospace, I think is so critical as we have these large goals to set humans to Mars, and other very long-term missions we have in mind. I think it's so critical we work together. So I'm really glad that Canada is able to continuously spread that message to other Canadians, as well as get more international footing in the space industry, which is incredible. And I have to ask this question to you because I'm sure you've had many incredible memories and moments being a part of the Canadian Space Agency. What has been the most memorable or special moment as the president of the Canadian Space Agency?
The most. There have been many, right? It's a job that was a dream. Is a dream job for sure. If you enjoy space, it's a dream job because you get exposed to a lot of things. So I think, as I mentioned a bit earlier, when I saw tears in the eyes of grown adults, engineers, scientists, who have a reputation for being very, very cold, very stern, but to see them teary-eyed when they would see the successful launch of their satellite going into space, seeing the culmination of decades of work, seeing the potential that their payload will bring to future scientific research, you have to, you kind of melt on the inside, right? It's a very human reaction to something that is very technical, very cold, right? The rocket must go up, it must not explode, it must put the payload in a proper orbit, very technical, very tactical kind of stuff. But the human element, behind all of that is has always been something that I've thoroughly appreciated. But in terms of the one key moment, I'd have to say that bringing our astronaut David Saint-Jacques to the ladder that he climbs before getting into the Soyuz capsule, and being able to touch that rocket, is something that will stay with me for the rest of my life, right? The Russians have a different philosophy about launching into space, so they allow, non-astronaut people to actually go near the rocket, which is different, to the U.S., where people are, miles away from the rocket, and only a few people can actually approach it. So that opportunity to take David to the first rungs of that ladder is really, a moment I will cherish forever.
Yeah, that's a beautiful moment. And you were mentioning, I was there at Launch Canada when they launched the first rocket, like student-built rocket at a rocket competition held in Canada. And it was a really magical moment because right after the rocket went up and it was a successful flight, the team got together and hugged each other and they were all like so joyful and so excited. And I think it just embodied the spirit of rocketry, the spirit of the space industry to continuously push limits. I mean, as university students, they built from scratch a rocket that was gigantic to go up, have a successful flight, collect data, and come back down. And I think that process, that hard work, it just showed, and their camaraderie, like they're as a team together, they worked really well with different roles, different parts. And I remember them talking about their rocket and how passionate they were, and to see their hard work come to life was just such a beautiful moment. And very similarly, my first event with Ignited Thinkers when I was in eighth grade was where I went to an orphanage and I taught 75 kids how to build and fly model rockets, and they never have built rockets or even had any STEM extracurriculars at that point. And when they launched their rockets that they built, their faces just lit up with excitement. And, that face still lives in my eyes. So I can definitely relate with what you were saying about seeing that excitement, seeing that space, seeing that spirit of the space community is always so exciting. And I can't wait to, hopefully, I've never been to a rocket launch in person, but hopefully one day a real rocket launch in person would be an incredible moment. And we talked a lot about the importance of communicating the importance of space to the general public. And so, to be more specific, I wanted to dive into the question of why space? Why is investing and exploring space important and beneficial to everyone here on Earth? So, in your words, what is the importance of space? Why should we invest in space?
Well, there's a number of good reasons, and I won't cover the entire list. That would be too complicated and not very interesting for the auditors, um, for your audience. So, when you look back into space, the space community matured over time, right? And that's normal. Just like the auto community matured over time, the airplane community matured over time. Space is the same thing. So there was a time in the recent future where the early few decades, space was dominated by engineers and scientists, right? It was the playground for very intelligent people who were very highly specialized, and you looked up to them, during the Apollo days, the Mercury days, and whatnot. And Canada put a few of our own communication satellites in space, Alouette and whatnot. So we looked at them in awe. Like that was the penultimate level of technical accomplishment. But now space is a lot more commoditized, right? So it's a lot more available and open out there. So I'm go back to I had written a note here that I want to make sure that I don't want to forget. As space is commoditized and is more open, we're seeing interest in folks that have a particular application in mind, and they're able to put into space things that are going to be useful, right? So we've put in space a lot of scientific payloads that are going to help with climate change, right? Which I think it must be a priority to everyone out there fighting, reducing climate change. And space gives you that ability to do that. But whereas before it was, the work of just a few specialists, it's now a whole lot more global. People are putting into space, small CubeSats that can monitor a particular molecule and whatnot. So we're not putting into space satellites that are the size of a minivan to get data on climate change. Students are putting, technical payloads in space, the size of a Rubik's Cube or two or three Rubik's Cube combined together, and they're collecting, great data. We're seeing, because of the Moon program that we're collaborating with the Americans, which eventually will lead to the Mars programs, we're seeing a lot of investment into space medicine so that those astronauts can survive, the 18-month journey to go to Mars and come back. Because you won't have an opportunity to go to the drugstore to pick something up or to have all sorts of medical specialists on board in case there's a trauma or accident. No, there will be one medical crew member, and this person will have to be supported through robotic, through artificial intelligence, through other means, to do pretty much any kind of medical procedure required during that 18-month mission. We couldn't call on a doctor on Earth to do that today. It's just too complicated and whatnot. But in getting to Mars, we're going to have to figure it out. And what we're going to figure out is going to be directly applicable. Like there's going to be a direct line of sight between building something for the Moon or the Mars journey and how we can apply it to, say, remote medicine back here on Earth, right? So, we can use that kind of direct line of sight principle for pretty much everything that is being discussed for the future of space. So, yes, it's about putting something in space, but I think what's even more important is that that one thing will provide benefit to humankind back down on Earth. So as we explore space, we're helping ourselves back here on Earth in terms of our standard of living and our health and whatnot. So that direct correlation is the principal benefit of why we need to continue going into space.
Yeah, I think your answer perfectly encapsulated the idea of space is for Earth. When we're exploring to send humans to Mars, we need to answer a lot of questions, both scientifically, technologically, advance both our medical understanding as well as our engineering design. I think, especially when you were mentioning about space medicine, it's a topic I'm incredibly fascinated and intrigued by. We need to answer questions like how do we combat radiation in space? How do we prevent bone density loss? How do we, protect astronaut health? And if they have a medical emergency, and they can't communicate back to Earth very quickly, what can we do to help support them? What AI technology do we need to, put in the spacecraft for them to be protected in space? And all of that will push us to be able to innovate, create, and develop technology that'll help us here back on Earth, as you were mentioning, in remote villages and continue to make healthcare more accessible for a very diverse audience. And I think one of the answers I think what your answer really reminded me of is space is an industry where it answers and it comes up with challenging questions we wouldn't otherwise think of. If we were just very comfortable here on our planet, we wouldn't really push ourselves to continue to innovate, to think beyond. But space provides that very challenging environment that pushes our ingenuity, pushes our creativity to really its limits and breaks its limits for us to innovate and create all that we have today, from GPS to satellite innovations to understanding more about our planet's history. Everything comes from the basis of the space industry. So I think the exploration and investment that we're doing needs to continuously expand if we want to push ourselves and push humanity forward. And kind of talking, from your answers, I can really see that you're really passionate about space and advancing space for humanity. So, my next question for you is what was the aha moment that ignited your passion for space? I feel like, for some students, it's like a book or a movie or maybe a role model. I'm curious for you, what was that aha moment that made you so passionate about space?
Well, I'm going to show my age here, but I remember as a young child, my parents waking me up in late evening. We lived in Quebec at the time, Quebec City. Um, and they woke my brother and myself up to go and watch something on the TV. You know, we're talking about the Apollo 11 landing on the moon, right? So it happened on the 20th of July, 69. So I was about 8 years old, seven. And I had fairly disciplined parents. Like when it was time to go to bed, and it was a context of that time as well, right? So children go to bed, you went to bed, right? And typically early. So for them to wake us up in the evening, it was like my brother and I kind of looked at ourselves going, something is wrong. Why would they do that? Especially these parents, right? Whoa, whoa. So, but then we realized it was something special. And then watching on a black and white TV, circa 1960s, images that were very snowy, that were not very clear. The first, step on the moon was something that stuck with me. And I think because it combined with that emotion of this must be really special for my parents to wake me up, right? It was an historic moment for humankind. But combining something that I thought was really fantastic to a very strong emotion made sure that it was cemented in my mind forever. So, that was my aha moment because it drove me to always want to work in the aerospace and at the end of my career in the space sector.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked with so many different guests, and there have been a few who mentioned the Apollo landing, and that's exactly what makes me excited about space commercialization because there are rocket launches almost every single day. I actually have this app where it tells me what rocket launches are happening every day, and there's something happening every day or every other day, and I think it's absolutely mind blowing. So if a student searches up a rocket launch or happens to read the news or scroll through Twitter, they see a rocket launch and maybe it'll inspire them just how the Apollo mission inspired thousands and millions of students across the world to pursue aerospace. And I think all these rocket launches, there's some that are sending incredible individuals to space. Everyone has mixed thoughts about the commercialization of space, but I think it's such a powerful tool to inspire youth to get involved in space because they can see the tangible rocket launching into space and beyond. So I think it's so exciting, and I'm really glad to hear that you were able to treasure that moment and understand its importance at a very young age and kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you navigated your career. I think that's incredible. And throughout this journey, did you have any obstacles kind of pursuing this career? And if you did have obstacles, how did you overcome them? Because a lot of times we look at the successes of individuals, we look at their resume, we look at their LinkedIn, and we're like, wow, they are so successful. But there's always a story behind all of those successes. So I'm curious, did you have obstacles? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Well, I think everyone has obstacles, and I don't think I faced obstacles that would have been overwhelmingly different than anyone else. I mean, we grow up and we develop our career, in different economic times. We're part of the history of our country evolving, and there's ups and downs in a country's history, in a country's economic cycle, and that shapes how how many problems you have and how you deal with them and how we educate our children. I was educated in a way that today would not be successful at all, right? But yet, I achieved a measure of success. You live with your times and you grow with your times. So there's not really, a problem, an issue, or a challenge that I faced, which is substantially different than what young people are going to face in the decades to come. We adapt to the context in which we work, and if you're a problem resolution person, you're going to be having quite a number of new opportunities in space to apply your passion to resolve problems, be them short term or longer term. So I think you have to address the resolution of these problems with a number of approaches which have survived time and survive the different historical contexts in which we live. But I can name four of these competencies. One would be communication, right? You need to define the problem so that everyone understands, and everyone understands the problem the same way, right? Then there's collaboration. There's more than one mousetrap to fix a problem, right? So it's not that the mousetrap that I have in mind is the best mousetrap. So you have to find a way to collaborate. There's someone else who's got a better idea than you out there, right? When you enter a room, you should enter the room with a lot of humility. There's someone in this room that has a better idea than me, right? So how do you go about getting that idea out in the open, to have someone put it on the table? So those are skills you need to develop. The other one about problem resolution is focus, right? You have to focus and focus and focus. Your first solution may not work. Refocus, regroup, try something else, but focus on resolving that problem. And I think the third point I want to bring back to you is celebrate. So you will fix that problem. Celebrate your achievement, right? Something was won somewhere. And maybe you didn't get the result you wanted in fixing that problem. So it may not be 100% fixed, but whatever you've achieved, you need to celebrate. You need to applaud folks who have worked on that particular issue and make sure that they're going to be with you the next time you're facing a similar issue.
Yeah, those are really four incredible points to problem resolution. I think a lot of times when we come across obstacles, our mind scatters in a thousand different directions and we don't know what is the right step to do. But I think just slowing it down and thinking about these four steps and being like, okay, I'm going to communicate, I'm going to work with others, I'm going to figure out what are those tiny steps that I can take to solve the issue at hand, and how can I go about solving and then celebrating what I did accomplish. We tend to minimize our results and our accomplishments and tend to maximize our problems, issues, and things we don't have. And I think, looking at the situation again at the cup, there's like the half filled cup, looking at the part that you did fill, looking at the part you did accomplish is so critical. And as a student myself, there are obstacles like all the time, maybe not as big as someone, who in the industry might be facing or someone in a different situation might be facing. But I think in our own world, we all have our own obstacles, whether they be small or big. And I think acknowledging them and trying to remember that there are people in similar situations like you were mentioning, I think is key so that you remember that you can get out of it and you can be just as successful as someone you look up to. And as we're coming closer to concluding this interview, we've been able to learn about your journey, your role, how you navigated this industry. My last and final question for you is what final piece of advice do you have for young students regarding their pursuit of a passion in STEM, aerospace, really just any career? Something you wish you knew when you were in high school or college, just one piece of advice. Like imagine you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice. What would that be?
I guess two things, right? If you're into a technical field of whatever nature, as a young person, you need to excel in that field. You need to master that field because that is the foundation to your future, right? So you have to be technically competent. So don't skim over those types of things. You'll pay a price for that later, right? So be competent in what you do. But then as you mature, as your career brings you new opportunities, you will grow as an individual, you will grow as a technical person, and you will be asked then to take on bigger challenges, different challenges. And the second point I want to bring is that when I was young in the technical field, most of what dominated was the technical field.
Yeah.
Despite that kind of training and that kind of mindset, over time, I've come to realize that the people skills that you need to be successful are just as important. And at some point in your career, when you become more senior, will be more important than your technical skills, right? So as your career evolves, you'll be dealing more and more with people challenges than you will with technical challenges. And I look back in my days, we didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. Yes, we got psychology courses, and in the military, I took leadership training and whatnot. But I guess I never had someone tell me how important it was to the success of my future and make the link between the two. So I guess the second point I want to make is just about that, right? You need to develop those people skills. You need to be communicating a whole lot better. And that's a skill that you learn. It's not given that you have a great degree in a very a well regarded institution with a very, very difficult degree. It's not going to be enough for a very successful career. Spend time, learning about how to collaborate with people, how to communicate, how to be empathetic. If you're going to be a good leader tomorrow and you're going to be leading technically oriented projects or programs or missions and whatnot, as the leader, it's all about how you're going to manage the people. As a leader, you will have responsibilities that will take you away from the nuts and bolts of your technology. And the only way that you're going to be able to succeed is if throughout your career, you've developed those people skills that are going to be critical to the success of your team. So, if I repeat myself, but to wrap it up, be a specialist in your early years. And as you do that, develop the people skills that will make sure you will continue to be successful throughout the rest of your career.
That is one of the most important and incredible advices that I did hear. Thank you so much for that. I think sometimes as a student, you're always taking tests, you're always trying to be the best in your field and best in your subject. And I think remembering to not take shortcuts when you're doing that and when you're studying, and make sure you really understand its applications to the real world. And then also develop those skills to be able to work with others, to communicate. Especially, I feel like in a lot of STEM subjects or STEM students, really, we tend to be individual workers or people who like to kind of study all the time. And I think remembering to also communicate, to talk with people, and to be able to work in a team is equally as important as learning the information. So I will definitely keep that to heart as I'm navigating my career. And I hope every single student and young professional who's listening also takes that to heart. And so I want to thank you so much, Mr. Laporte, for taking your time to speak with me and speak with everyone who's listening. It's been an incredible honor meeting you in person and now speaking with you like this. I'm really excited to hopefully again meet you in person one day. So thank you for coming on today.
Well, it's a pleasure, and kudos to you for putting together interviews like this that could, I hope, inspire a few people. You do an excellent job in terms of promoting the space industry, the space community. So bravo to you as well.
Thank you so much.